All right. So first of all, can't forget to thank all of our sponsors. Love that they do this every year and kind of make all of the free unconference possible. So as Ian mentioned, I'm a principal product manager at a little company called HEB. If you live in Texas, you know and hopefully love HEB and shop there on the regular. I'm also a coach at ProductCamp. So if you want product advice, mentorship, coaching, hopefully good advice, you can reach me there. I also teach at General Assembly. I'm the founder of the Product League, which is a Austin-based meetup where we talk about all things product management. We've really built a great community around that. We have an actual in-person meeting coming up on July. Maybe we'll have one in July. I don't know. But we do have one in December, the 12th, on Lazarus Brewery on 6th Street. We're going to be talking about how to improve your soft skills. And that'll be a joint presentation with Women Who Code and UX and ATX. So I'm also the founder of the Product Job Club, which helps people transition into product management. Darren Smith, who's speaking at 2:45 on neurodiversity, is a alumni of that. He helped use the group to land that job in product management. I also teach at Agile Austin, and you can link with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to share lots of resources. So I know there's no plugging, but we have lots of positions open at HEB. I've included in the deck in the Slack channel. These are, you can link to see all of ours. If you feel like you're a good fit, dive in, look at these, let me know. So this is only part of the hiring we're doing for product managers. So I'm happy to answer any questions about what it's like to work at HEB and how great it is. Yana is here. She can talk about, how great HEB is. Hey, how did the Leander store opening go?
Hi, it's been super awesome. I'm here right now, so we're pretty dang busy, but it's been going really good. Yeah, over $500,000 in sales the first day.
Wow. Well, this is as you can imagine, this is the busiest week for groceries. And so Janet opening a store on the busiest week, a highly anticipated store, you can only imagine like how much work goes into that. So I appreciate you taking time to join us. So let's dive right in. What the heck does a product manager do? So at the very high level, we're answering three basic questions. Do people want this? Like, can we identify the user needs so that we can then use that to reach product market fit? Should we build this? Okay, does this align with our business goals and our mission? And is this gonna help us grow a viable business? And then finally, can we do it? Are we in a good position? Does it make sense for us as a company or as a startup or whatever to build this feature or product? So, this is a great way to think about your job as a product manager. And the reason I put this presentation together was this sort of mindset is not only helpful when you're in the job, but it's especially helpful as you're trying to get the job and how to think, put yourself in the shoes of the people that are going to be interviewing you. And they want to understand, like, does this person think like a product manager? Can they come in here and understand and ramp up and get up to speed on what we're trying to do? So this is a kind of like a nice framework to use not only at your job, but as you're preparing to get a job. So as a product manager, you always want to start with the why. So questions that you'll ask, and we're going to go to each of these a little bit in detail, is first of all, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is that problem? And you got to go into details and then figure out who is impacted by this and how many of people are there? And like, okay, what is the value that we could generate if we solve that problem? And then you want to think about, all right, there's got to be some way that they're solving this problem now, even if it's some sort of workaround. And, okay, what are those alternatives? And can we deliver something better? And how would we measure whether it's actually better and whether the users are getting more value out of this or not? And then the next questions you want to ask are, all right, why should we build this? What's our differentiator? Everyone's, you talk about build a better mousetrap. People, that's kind of like a common phrase. But you don't have to build something like completely net new and invent something. You can improve something that's out there. But you need to make sure that does this make sense for my company, for our skill sets, and for the customers that we generally serve or want to serve. Next, you're going to get into like, okay, does it make sense for us to try and build this now? Or are we too late? Or are we too early? If we build it, how are we going to roll it out? How are we going to reach our customers? What are the channels that we're going to use? Is this something that we're going to sell on Instagram, or are we going to try and get it like on the shelf in a local hardware store? Really kind of depends. Then finally, you want to figure out, all right, how are we going to measure whether this is going to be successful in the business? And then finally, after you answer all of those questions, you then ask, what are the solution requirements? Then you get into the technical side. And, if we go back, you see here that technical constraints, far too often product managers and businesses start there. Be like, oh, we can build this. Sure, you can, but that doesn't mean you should. So I often recite the fact that 80% of software and software features are never used or rarely used. So you really want to make sure that you're focusing on that 20%, because products fail not because they're too hard to build. They fail because there's no market, or there's not a sufficient market, or you haven't figured out how to reach that market. So that's why those previous questions are more important than this last one. Let me stop there. Any questions so far? No? All right, I am going to be randomly calling on people. So don't go anywhere. I'm looking at you, Roger. You too, Peter. Ross, I'm going to call you. Josh, we talked already. You have to do it. You have to talk to me now. So basically, if I just send your name and you don't want to talk, this is really the time to leave the presentation. But hopefully you won't. All right, let's start with the why. Do people want this? We've talked about the why. What is the value prop, target market, and market size? So your job as a product manager is to build products that are solving problems. And you really need to have that empathy and a willingness and ability to kind of see things from the customer perspective. So my job at HEB right now is I oversee all of the product management for our pharmacies. So that includes what we put on the website, what we put into our mobile apps. And so I need to figure out, like, what problems am I solving for our customers coming to our HEB pharmacies, but also I need to make sure that I'm solving problems for the partners that are working there, the pharmacists and the technicians. So that's where my focus is. And that's why, I love working for HEB, because I have pretty easy access to customers and to those partners. So once you kind of define that, the great way to kind of really hone in on what the problem you're trying to solve is to create a problem statement. So early in the pandemic, we really focused around how are we as HEB Pharmacy going to make sure that we continue to build upon the trust that we have with our customers and to help them in their time of need. Obviously, there was a lot of health concerns about going into stores. How are people going to get their prescriptions if you're immune compromised? So we really focused on that problem statement, and we rolled out a number of initiatives, including free delivery and being able to kind of proactively go out and help people get 90-day supplies of their medications instead of just 30 days. And so a number of things that we kind of did to kind of solve that problem. You could do a whole presentation just on problem statements, but we won't do that. Next up, what is your defining your market? So there's lots of people, and I don't love war analogies, but the one in that Jeffrey Moore uses in his book. Wait, what book was it? I can see the title. It'll come to me. But he talks about, like, you need to establish a beachhead. You don't want to try to be like, oh, we're going to be the one-stop place for everybody. you need to establish a beachhead. Who are your customers? Who are the ones that are most impacted by this? And then create specific personas and detail them so that we really understand who those are. And then when you're working with stakeholders, like the engineers, designers, and the business stakeholders, that you're all understanding, okay, who is this person? What is their day-to-day? Like, why are they coming to us to help solve a specific problem? And so probably some of you are very comfortable and familiar with how you can segment users. You can segment them in all sorts of different ways. What we do at HEB is, this is just one example of what, the way that we have done significant discovery and research to learn about our customers. So we have certain customers that we consider like the provider. So in my family, that would be my wife. She's the one that is the head of the household, making sure that we're fed properly. She does all the planning around cooking and in all of that. We also found people who are, home chefs, people who are very disciplined, who are maybe following a specific diet, whether it's paleo or, and then you have me. Well, you know what? I was eat to live. Like this, I was like, it's almost as if they just, were looking in my window of my house when my wife is out of town, me just eating directly out of the pizza box. And then you have the hacker. Although I will say, through COVID, I've become more of a disciplined person. So all of this to say, you want to know, like, what are the tendencies? What are the types of people that you're targeting? Any questions on those first two? The next thing is you want to figure out, like, all right, how big is the market size? If you have a great, amazing, innovative solution, but your market size is too small, well, you're not going to be able to find that product market fit where you can actually build a business around it. So you need to understand, like, how big is your target audience? How can you reach them? And really, how can you grow, be successful enough that and reach enough of them so that you can build a successful business. Let me keep going. I'm so cautious about the time. Well, we're about halfway through. We're doing pretty well. Next up, is it feasible? And you want to look at the competitive landscape, user value, and solution requirements. So is it feasible? What solutions are available out there today? So in the case of HEB, if we were trying to roll out new options to be able to easily send people home with dinner options for their entire family, we need to know, like, all right, well, if they're not going to stop at HEB to pick up maybe like a pre-cooked meal or a prepped meal, where else are they doing this? Well, they're getting drive-through, they're ordering maybe through Instacart and getting things from restaurants. Maybe they've got one of those, the Blue Apron or something like that. We want to make sure that we understand everything of how our customers are currently trying to solve that problem, and how do we stack up against some of those competitors. This is where discovery is really important, because this point right here, product managers often underestimate competing products and services. What they also underestimate is how people are solving their problems. So, I mentioned here, we as a grocery company are not only in competition with Walmart and Kroger's and Randall's and all of that, but it's also fast food restaurants, meal prep, online retailers, food trucks, etc. Next up is user value. And this is so key. Like, I remember speaking at ProductCamp maybe like 6 years ago, and just asking just how people used basic data to drive their decisions, and was really surprised at the lack of data-driven decisions, and the fact that people were making decisions without pointing to specific KPIs that they had been tracking. I think that's really, really changing a lot, though. And people know, like, all right, for us to be successful, we need to increase these areas, these specific metrics, knowing what your KPIs are. So for us, it may be like basket size. It may be the number of times that they're using a specific service at HEB, whether it's curbside or delivery, or maybe it's some of our meal prep options. So you need to know, like, what are the metrics that are really going to move the needle, and then make sure that you're setting success metrics for your products and tracking those along the way. So next up, solution requirements. Okay, what does it take to be to make this a great product that you'll go out there and will be successful? And this is, as a product manager, you have to work really well with your engineers, your designers. And then also, like, I do a lot of work with our legal team, our privacy team, making sure that I'm adhering to HIPAA compliance. And you will find, like, as you go through and you start to think about, like, even if you feel like, man, if we can really solve this problem, it's potentially could be really impactful for the business. And we may have this sort of change in terms of metrics, but you realize, like, oh, you know what? We didn't anticipate these things. We made these assumptions. And then as we kind of started to go through the requirements, we realized that that assumption was wrong. So, earlier I was saying you don't want to, get too far ahead on this. But once you get to this point, it's still, not a guarantee that it makes sense to build it. And then, should we be doing this? This is the business factor, your differentiators, your market window, and your go-to-market strategy. So for business metrics, and this is where it's really important, and you can be really effective as a product manager, where you can speak deliberately and in detail about business metrics and your customer metrics. So again, for example, for me at HEB, everything we track everything from how long do people wait in line to speak to a pharmacist, how long from when an order is placed until the script is filled, and how long are our calls, how many people are calling into our support center, how many times do we have errors on our mobile app. So all of these things, and we can really work with the business to hone in on something, be like, hey, if we feel like we can get 20% of HEB customers who aren't using HEB pharmacies, but are just shopping with us, if we increase that by 20% and have them do both their shopping and pharmacy at HEB, what would that mean for the business? And how would we go about that? So understanding what are the business metrics that you want to track in the short and the long term. Hopefully your company is using OKRs, and you can use your KPIs and OKRs to kind of ladder up. But again, it really depends on the company and the kind of product, I guess, maybe how mature the product org is. What's our differentiator? I kind of touched upon this. Why you really have to figure out, like, why are we the best suited to do this? And are you, if you're trying to do too many new things at once, we're going to try a new product for a new group of people using a new channel that we're going to reach them, and we're going to be doing live events. If you do too many new things, it can hinder your chances of success. But if it's a natural extension of the business that you're doing, or an additional problem that your existing customers have, then maybe you are best suited to do it, and maybe it's in line with your skill sets for your engineers or just your business in general. So the example I gave here is the health and wellness. So people who live in Texas, we're a 120-year-old company that we've been very invested in the communities in the state. So we wanted to use that relationship and trust that we have with people to kind of expand our health and wellness services to help people make healthier choices so that they can lower their healthcare costs, lower their grocery costs, and improve their lifespan. Really, that's one of the goals that we have. And next up, the market window. Do you have to be the first to market? No, not really. First mover advantage can be an advantage, but if you get out there with a half-baked product, it can definitely fail. You think about like how popular TikTok is now. And, there was lots of other like kind of video streams like that back in the day, but none of them really took off. And so TikTok isn't the first mover advantage, but they've done things in a way that has, basically they came out with a better product. So I'm going to go off video because it wouldn't be a presentation without one of my dogs disturbing me. So we let Scout out. Talks amongst yourselves. How's everyone doing? I'm back. There we go. How are we doing on time? Got about 9 minutes. Finally, the go-to-market strategy. Where can you find your customers? Where are they? And where's an effective way for you to kind of convey and deliver your the value prop to them, to say like, hey, if you're having this problem, we can solve it for you. But there's also like a lot of considerations that you need to think about here. And what is kind of consistent with your brand? How much data are you collecting from customers? If you are doing it on a different platform, is that gonna, how much is that gonna impact your potential budget? Because you're having to maybe share revenue streams depending on what your revenue, your model for how you make money. How much is it gonna cost you for marketing and things like that? All right, after you go through all of those, you get into that go or no go decision. And what's important is, hopefully as a product manager, you're going and you're answering these questions and you're researching it and you're building up this story. And I oftentimes will kind of say like, here's the opportunities that I want to pursue at HEB. And I'll put together a business case and we'll look into the specifics of each of these questions. And I can say like, hey, this is why I think that it's worth dedicating resources to this new project. Here are the risks that I've identified, and here's why I still think it's worth going forward and how we're going to mitigate those risks. So by kind of walking through and thinking about those different perspectives of a potential product or a new feature, you can then put together a business case. So it's always good to kind of walk through this in your mind, because if you can get to the point where someone can say a product and say like Amazon is getting into automobiles, and you can walk through all of those things like, well, why should Amazon do this? Like, well, maybe they want to get into specifically trucks because they have a lot of shipping and that would, maybe lower some of their logistics costs. You can really kind of go through and see like, what are the potential positives and negatives of an idea in each of these categories. And people want to see that when they hire product managers. They want to know that you're thinking about these things and that that, you can't overlook one of those. Because if you do, you could be jeopardizing the potential success of the product. So that is really all I have. Any questions from the group?
I have a question. So I know you have quite a bit of time in product and you came recommended by some of my network here. What are some underestimated steps that you saw in your career from all the steps that you presented?
I would say the first mistake people make is that they don't validate the problem soon enough. I love to give the example of, what is it? Now I'm blanking on it. That two-wheel thing. Darren, help me out. What like we gave the example in General Assembly. No, not luggage. What is the thing that mall cops drive around on? Segways.
Segways.
So segways. Thank you, Andrew. Segways. People were losing their minds over these. Like, this is the greatest invention ever. It's going to change like the way cities are built. And, all of this stuff, it didn't. Because wasn't really solving a problem. The problem wasn't like people need to be able to go 16 miles an hour. they needed to like easier way to kind of get around. And eventually that product, this kind of goes to, market window, was eventually solved later just by scooters. You don't need to buy like a $3,000 Segway. You can rent a scooter for $1 and then just throw it on the freaking curb like everyone does in Austin. So I would say the first one, Christian, to your question, not validating the problem. And then the second one is probably not understanding the customer landscape. Because there's times where people are like, oh, we could do this, but they realize like, oh, wait, that actually there's a very little space or no space at all. Or they will do a thing where they think, no, we can't possibly do it. That so-and-so owns that industry already. But there's always customers that are kind of being underserved. And if you can identify those, that's how establish your beachhead. So if I had to pick two, those would be the two.
Thank you.
Has anyone, like, I am constantly dunking on Segway and I feel bad. Does anyone here, anyone ever owned a Segway? I think now would be pretty cool. I would use it to go get the mail and stuff, but I mean, that's about it.
There was an interesting case about the Google Glass and how they actually reprofiled the Google Glass for enterprise. They didn't understand what to do with it, but it is a very niche product that actually exists today.
And it'll come back. They like, the same way, like I just heard this morning that Apple put in a patent to include cameras in their AirPods. And see, that's going to be part of like their augmented reality play. And that's, so you don't have to have a whole Oculus, but if you have the combination of the AirPods and the watch and the phone, you can kind of get some of that stuff without having to wear an Oculus and still kind of have some of that whole metaverse stuff. Yeah. Google Glass, ahead of its time, looked like ridiculous. I remember that's a very high. I'm going back to Anissa's she's like, nothing highly inappropriate. So I can't give a quote. But Kara, if you Google Kara Swisher, if you know her, she's New York Times, and Google Glass, she had an extremely funny quote about Google Glass. So, any other questions about thinking like a product manager and why it's important not only for when you have the role as a product manager, but for how to get how to get jobs?
Dan, I'm curious what you see as the relationship between items 1 and 4, which I believe are the value proposition and value and problem statements, and the competitive landscape. Because it seems like when you're doing your sort of problem definition and selection and identification, really what you're doing is finding the white space, finding where you already have to understand the competitive landscape to some extent so that you can find the unsolved problems.
Yeah, and see, it's a really great point because, this is why it's so important for product managers to become the expert in the market and so that they can understand the problems. And I agree that there's very much an overlap between those two areas. It's interesting because you see what companies try to do when they try to branch out and they're not proficient in a certain area, in a certain kind of market. They oftentimes will acquire someone who has that knowledge and who has that expertise. And they feel like, all right, well, we can bring in our understanding of problem solving and leverage it with their expertise. So to kind of open and expand our business. But yeah, I think it's a good point because if you don't understand the market really well and you don't have, if you're not kind of in the front lines of what the people are experiencing, it's going to be hard to build a product that they're really going to love.
Do you have to be a domain expert for that?
Say that again?
Do you have to be a domain expert for that?
You don't have to know everything, but you have to be able to go and gather the information. So depending on how long you're the product manager in that space, like I am new to pharmacy. I'm only 5 months in, but I literally work with people that have been doing it for, I have two main partners. One has been at HEB Pharmacy for 20 years. The other's been there for 30. So we're joined at the hip because I can kind of go and present things and, build the business cases, but they help me understand what is really going to be impactful and what is not. All right, we are at time. As Ian put in the thing, please fill out the form. I love getting the feedback. It's always interesting doing these 30-minute sessions because it's very different, because I like to ramble on and usually do lots of hands-on stuff. So another plug, if you haven't joined the Product League, please do. Like I said, we're going to do something in person. We always try to include a hands-on portion. So the goal every time we do the Product League is to have takeaways where you can all right, this is going to help me be better at my job, or this is going to help me kind of get that next promotion, whatever it may be. But thank you, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday.